In life, we all experience extreme events. I want to tell you my story and maybe a little bit about what I learned. So my parents often tell the story about me when I was in play school. One Friday afternoon, we were told that we could bring our bicycles in school the following week. So later in the day, we were out in the yard and I heard some of the older kids saying that they could ride their bike with no stabilizers. Obviously, me being me, I chimed in, claiming that I could too. And then I realized I had to follow through with it. So that evening I went home and I nagged until Dad would take off one of my stabilizers. And then I nagged him some more until he took the other one off. All weekend I repeatedly hit the dirt, fell off that bike, cuts and bruises everywhere. But for some reason I kept getting back up. Happily on Monday morning I arrived into school and people have told me that I cycled majestically around that yard. But the important thing was that the stabilizer stayed at home. Why was it that I was able to repeatedly get up from failure? It's simple. Kids and babies are fearless. They don't understand fear. It's not in their makeup. It's something that we as adults teach them. Everybody has that something, It lights us up inside. It gives us a buzz like nothing else. It doesn't matter if nobody else understands it because to us it's magic. For me, that was windsurfing. It totally consumed me. I couldn't separate myself from it. And I decided the best way to spend more time on the water would be to become an instructor. So that's what I did. And I sort of fell on my feet with a brilliant job down the west of Ireland. I suppose you could say it was my ideal job, living on the beach pretty much all day, every day with a great bunch of people. My windsurfing really improved over the course of a couple of summers out there, and I got to the stage where I was doing front flips and freestyle, and I even started to compete. The only word I can use to really describe my relationship with windsurfing was passion. When I was on the water, it was my escape and my best freedom, I suppose. Then the next big thing for me was college. First year arrived and I was living in college accommodation. The group of lads I lived with just absolutely clicked. I ended up doing a course that I actually really enjoyed. And strange enough, for a first year, I actually struck up a really good work-play balance. But then it came to the end of the year, and I found myself down the west again. It was one of the first days of the season, and I was sitting totally by myself on Ellie Beach. It was one of those ideal scenes when, as you look back down the beach, the only footprints in the sand are your own. The sun is setting over the horizon, glistening on the water, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. And next thing, I catch myself smirking away uncontrollably. One of those moments when you just catch yourself smiling. And I realized why. It was because I was just so content with where I was, with what I'd achieved over the past couple of years. And I suppose, really just that all my hard work had paid off and gotten me to where I was. Little did I know that in only a matter of weeks, my whole life would quite literally be turned on its head. Just over 2 years ago, I had an accident doing something that I'd done so many times before. In an instant, I went from having the crack on the beach on the first day of my holidays to having one of those moments that you only see on TV where your whole life flashes in front of your eyes. I ran down the beach, dived into the water, not anticipating just how shallow it was. And when I hit the bottom, I broke my neck. As I lay there face down in the water, I was both completely aware of what had just happened, but also completely unable to move. Luckily, I was taken from the water before I blacked out or suffocated, and from there, chaos ensued. I remember my friends frantically running to get help, to control the gathering crowd, but at the same time totally normalizing the situation, lying on the ground beside me and having a chat. Within an hour, I was strapped up and in the back of an ambulance on the way to a helipad. They wouldn't let anyone come with me. I remember the fear setting in. I was essentially alone and totally broken in a foreign country. The next time I woke up was as one of my best friends walked around the bottom of my bed in intensive care. And I was greeted by this smiling but tear-filled face. And I remember thinking, this is serious. But it was also at that time that I found myself saying the words, "It's going to be okay." I was strapped to the bed, completely paralyzed from the armpits down. The only muscles that were moving were my shoulders and biceps. I couldn't even use my hands. I had tubes running down my throat to keep me breathing. This cage around my head that made me look like Frankenstein, with weights hanging off the back of it to straighten out my broken spine. Inside, I was the exact same person. I was still Jack, but I couldn't relate to this body that had been completely stripped of its independence and dignity in an instant. I'd gone from this free young lad to a state where I was completely vulnerable and totally dependent. In many ways, I was like a baby again, except this time, I knew all too well about the fear. So here I was in potentially one of the most life-changing situations I could ever find myself in. And that was when my swan impersonation began. As calm as you like on the surface, but paddling frantically to keep myself going beneath. I suppose the very fact that I chose to smile at that time was my decision that I wasn't going to give up and I wasn't going to let this beat me. It was at that time that I said to myself, "Jack, you start here." Despite how bleak the outlook was or how grim the starting point, I was at the bottom. I could only move towards the top. Because for me, it wasn't about the event that befell me that I was going to allow to define me for the rest of my life, but rather it was the response that I wanted people to remember. Along the way, I've had many hard choices to make. At every hurdle, and there could be 10 or 100 in a day, I have to choose between saying yes or no. I can or I can't. And ultimately, I suppose the decision is to fight on or to give up. It's never easy, but I keep choosing to say, yes, I can, and to keep on fighting, because I see it as my way forward. So I started making these goals for myself. Initially, I needed to learn how to breathe on my own again. Just think about that. How easy it is to breathe in and out. Next, I needed to learn to use the tiny bit of functioning muscle I had left to do as much as I possibly could for myself. I remember hours spent in the gym just trying to straighten out my arm. I remember spending 50 minutes in occupational therapy just trying to pick up a little wooden block, well, 4 of them. I remember arriving down another day and my therapist seeing just how frustrated I was with absolutely no way to vent it. So what does she do? She hands me a box of Scrabble and says, "Off you go and make as many curse words as you can." I also remember the first time I went home. And I really had to come to terms with what had actually happened for the first time. And just how scary a prospect that was. I remember the pain, but more so the guilt. Not so much from myself, but from my family and friends as to what the potential implications were for them. I remember this numbness that consumed me for a while, some days to the point where I couldn't even speak. But then I came through it, and from this position of pure vulnerability, once again I saw possibilities and opportunities, and I decided it was time to move forward. Over the last 2 years, a massive amount of work has gone in, all in an attempt to regain my independence. I think the only person that wasn't surprised when I was back in college and living away from home only 13 months post-injury, was myself. Gradually, as my energy started to improve, I stopped just existing in college. I started making my lectures, going out with my mates. I started building a gym program to get my body into the best possible condition I can be in, acknowledging that I need to live in the now, but also prepare myself for the inevitable breakthrough in the future. I suppose you could say I was dealt a bad card, but sure, people are dealt a bad card every single day. That girl that's waited her whole life to walk down the aisle and breaks her fingernail just before she goes. That's absolutely devastating. That one student that actually studied for the exam and still fails. And this young lad with the world at his feet that breaks his neck on the first day of his holidays. But it's not about the event, is it? It's about the response. It's about that decision, yes, I can, and to keep on fighting. She sucks it up and strolls down that aisle as if she owns the place. He studies twice as hard and absolutely nails that exam the next time. And that young chap does everything he can to keep his head above water. And then he decides he's going to kick life in the arse. It's not easy. I'd be lying if I said it was. But I find that the more I make that tough decision, the easier it gets. Yes, I still need help getting up in the morning, with tasks in college and getting around. Yes, the footpaths are uneven and there's hills bloody everywhere. Yes, it's a little bit different before. And yes, there's probably 1,000,001 other reasons that I could choose for not making any effort at all, or even getting up in the morning. But what a lot of you don't know about me is that there's still a tiny little bit of that fearless kid left inside me. And every single day, he reminds me that I can still cycle without my stabilizers. Thank you very much.